Okay, so today we are going to talk about how to truly master the 5 out motion offense. Now, a lot of coaches, when it comes to the 5 out continuous motion offense, they have this idea that to teach a motion offense is a way to get your team away from being robotic on the offensive end, meaning we're not running the same plays over and over again. We're learning how to play, how to read and react. The only issue with that is, though, when coaches then move into teaching a 5 out motion offense, they teach it in a way that also encourages their kids or their athletes, if we're dealing with an older age group, to also be robotic. So just because you're teaching a 5 out motion offense or any motion offense doesn't necessarily mean that you aren't teaching your athletes to be robotic. Let's take a look at what I'm talking about. Now, a lot of coaches will teach their athletes to play a motion offense that looks something similar to this. We have 5 spots on the basketball floor, all outside the 3-point line. We either start with a screen away, maybe down here, right? Or if we don't start with a screen away, instead we maybe start with some sort of cut to the basket, right? And everybody fills in from there, right? I think every single motion offense looks like this in some way. We pass the ball to the wing, we look for the basketball, and then we continue cutting, right? Then we continue cutting, and we continue to fill in a 5 out format, right? Everybody's ready. We pass the ball, we never stand still, we continue to cut, and we fill. The only issue with this type of motion offense or any type of motion offense that looks similar to this is that you're actually playing robotic. Even though you're teaching your athletes to not play robotic, by continuously forcing this type of offense, again, you're actually teaching your athletes to play robotic. You're teaching them how to play in this particular 5 out system. But that has its flaws, right? Because these cuts are not always going to work. Maybe you can look for the basketball right here and hope to get it to them, but maybe that's not going to be there. Maybe number 4 in this particular situation is going to have a mismatch where they can get to the basket. Then your 5 out is completely messed up. Who fills then? So again, we want to teach our athletes how to play, how to read and react, and not just play within a 5 out. Let's talk about how we can make sure that happens. So the first step in making sure that we're not playing robotically, even in a motion offense, is that we want to ensure we're creating offensive principles rather than an offensive system. So if we create offensive principles for our team to have, that's the true way to create a motion offense. That's the true way to create a continuous offense, rather than just throwing a specific system or a specific play at them. Now, what we want to teach these athletes, we want to teach them to read and react. We don't want to teach them a specific situation that could happen over and over again. We want to teach them our principles and how we want them to read and how we want them to react on the offensive end. Now, what are some of these key principles? My favorite are the following. Always look for a paint touch. So with any great offense, it always starts with a paint touch. Unless you have some elite 3-point shooters that are pulling up like Steph Curry behind the 3-point line, we need to find a way to get a paint touch. So that means either the person with the basketball getting into the key and driving into the paint, or it means somebody cutting and getting open inside the key for that paint touch. So if we start with all of our players in a 5-out, or if we start with a 4-out, 1-in, whatever that may be, again, it's read and react, right? We want to make sure we start our offense with a paint touch. That way, if we get inside the paint, it's going to open the paint up for somebody else. Another principle that we like to install is always be ready, right? So if somebody's driving to the paint and the defense collapses and gets a double team, are you ready to shoot the basketball? Are you ready to receive the basketball and attack the rim, right? We want to make sure that those principles are in place before we go over any type of plays. The next thing we want to make sure is that our athletes know how to screen away and how to screen for the ball. So a lot of times with a motion offense, a lot of teams don't even involve ball screens. They want to just have movement. Well, movement is good, but at some point you need to be able to score the basketball, and that's what we want to focus on. Screen away if that gets somebody open in the paint, or screen for the basketball if that gets somebody open in the paint. But we need to get a paint touch to get things going. And the last thing that we want to ensure is that all of our players know how to cut. right? So we never want a player standing still. We want all of our players to ensure they know how to cut, right? And an effective cut, because a cut can still be a paint touch. If you receive the ball down low, or if you receive the ball off a cut in the paint, that's still a paint touch. You're still getting in the paint. You're still having the opportunity for the defense to collapse. So if we make sure that our teams have these principles and know how to do these things, they can read and react in a motion offense type of environment. Let's take a look now at the Boston Celtics. The Boston Celtics run a read and react style offense that has motion offensive elements within it. Is it an exact 5-out motion offense? No, it's not. But they read and react. They have their players cut to the basket. They have their players screen, right? They have their players continuously moving with multiple different options, working together for continuous movement. So again, these guys aren't teaching a system. They're teaching these basic elements that we can learn on the offensive end. Okay, let's watch this first option here. And in this one, we'll see that basic pick and roll, right? So let's see. So we have Al Horford right here, and he's setting this screen up high for Derek White. And as we'll see right here, Derek White just gets that wide open lane to the basket because you can't really cheat off of these three-point shooters or Jaylen Brown. And for that reason, he'll just get a wide open lane to the rim. You'll see the Boston Celtics run that one a lot, to be quite honest. And surprisingly for them, it works. When you have guys like Derek White and Drew Holiday who are running that offense, mixed with some shooters and some really intense offensive threats like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, like I said earlier, you'll often get that easy lane to the basket. In this next option here, we'll watch this being run very similarly, but now we'll get that initial cut to the basket after the first pick and roll or pick and pop. So for this one, like I said previously, it's not always that wide open lane to the basket. Sometimes after that first initial screen, they'll go into some 5-out motion offense principles. And this is what we'll take a look at now. So we have Derek White up top with the basketball in his hands again. And we have Kristaps Porzingis setting that initial screen. But as you can see, the screen didn't really go too far. He kind of stopped halfway through the screen and instead popped to the three-point line. So now we have Kristaps Porzingis at the three-point line, and you'll immediately then see Jason Tatum, as soon as Kristaps Porzingis receives that basketball, cut through the paint because, as you can see right here, his defender's not really paying close attention. So immediately Jason Tatum will cut to the basket. He will get a wide open lane to the basket because what are you going to do? You can't cheat off of Jaylen Brown right here, and you can't even really cheat off of Drew Holiday or Derek White. At the Boston Celtics, one of their biggest advantages is that they can have 5 3-point threats on the floor at once, so the defense can't really cheat. And that's why right now you'll see Jason Tatum get that beautiful wide open layup. Something you'll see a lot with the Boston Celtics is they'll get some wide open layups because, like I said, you can't cheat off of 3-point threats. Now, those are two relatively easy options. So let's take a look at what the Boston Celtics will often do if those two options are not there or if they're being guided quite well. So as we know, we have that initial screen being set by Kristaps Porzingis or the whoever that 5 may be. Sometimes it's Al Horford. It really depends. So again, we have that screen being set, and let's just say they pop because that's kind of what we usually see for the most part with this Boston Celtics team. So this is usually swung up top to the three-point line. And as we know, we have that initial cutter who looks for the basketball. But as you know, when you're coaching a team or you're looking at a team where, maybe you don't have 5 3-point threats on the floor at once, how can we switch things up? How can we do what the Boston Celtics do? What did they do next? Because even for them, sometimes it's not there. So what will happen is this player will continue to cut and continue to move on while everyone else fills a spot. And then you'll often have 2 quick options here for number 2, the remaining player on the opposite side of the floor. And what we'll often see the Boston Celtics do is sometimes have this player move up and then immediately backdoor to the basket to see if we can get an option right here for another cutter for number 2. Now, I've seen the Boston Celtics do this a few times, but that isn't usually the option that they go to here because it isn't necessarily a safe option. It is something that, players can be taught to say, okay, maybe you could fall back on this. But what you'll often see the Boston Celtics do, if those few options aren't there, is a dribble handoff, a DHO. So you'll see number 5, dribble handoff over to number 2, right? Usually, again, this is Kristaps Porzingis. Hand off the ball to number 2 and set a screen. Number 2 will come off that screen with the basketball, and you'll often see number 2 drive to the basket while number 5 rolls. So typically here you'll see Jason Tatum in that Jaylen Brown rather in that number 2 spot, right, driving to the basket, while Kristaps Porzingis or Al Horford rolls to the basket as well. So you have 2 options right here. Then these players can start moving up, right, and filling a spot of a potential 3-point shooter if you get a double team down low. Now let's watch the Boston Celtics run this in action. Okay, let's take a look at the Boston Celtics running both of these sets in action. Now, as you'll see right here at the top of the floor, again, we have Derek White with the ball, and we already have Kristaps Porzingis popping to the 3-point line. Now, we have this cut already taking place, this initial cut, but as we can see, it's guarded pretty well here by Memphis. So what will happen here is Jaylen Brown is ready. He's watching the floor. He's seeing this, and we'll see a quick backdoor cut here by Jaylen Brown, which will get him an easy 2 at the rim. So that's that first initial option that we talked about from Jaylen Brown, that quick backdoor option. Now, is this an option that I would set in stone? Probably not, but it is something that I would teach a team to read and react to potentially have that backdoor option. But now let's take a look at the dribble handoff option, which is the option that they most often use. So as we can see here, we have our point guard at the top of the floor, and it looks like it is Kristaps Porzingis once again setting that screen, and he pops. Then we'll have Jaylen Brown originally cutting to the basket. Can we get that there? No. But because we don't have that, option, because it's being guarded pretty well here by Kelly Oubre, what we'll have Kristaps Porzingis do is run a dribble handoff over here with Derek White. So we have that dribble handoff, we have the screen, and then we have the pick and roll between Derek White and Kristaps Porzingis. In this situation, it went to Kristaps Porzingis, and he gets that wide open layup or dunk at the rim. So as we can see with these examples from the Boston Celtics, they're not necessarily teaching your conventional 5-out motion offense, but they do have motion offensive elements within their offensive sets, within their read and react style offense, right? For example, you see maybe their initial play didn't work, or that initial pick and roll or pick and pop didn't work, but then you have Jason Tatum cutting to the basket. And if that doesn't work, then you have a dribble handoff and everybody else is outside of the paint, ready to shoot, ready to attack. So they play a really good read and react style offense. Their players know to cut, their players know to screen off the ball, their players know how to screen on the ball. And through that, they are playing a continuous motion offense. So this basically shows that the 5-out motion offense doesn't necessarily need to be that same cut, look for something, pass, cut, look for something, pass, cut, look for something, because it's only so often that that's going to work. A better way to actually ensure that your team has a continuous motion offense is just to teach them these basic elements, teach them how to play, and have these offensive principles set in stone so that you can set up your team for offensive success. This is what the Boston Celtics do, and this is what a lot of NBA teams do as well, and college basketball teams lately, is to read and react. And that is the best way to play basketball, and that is the best way to teach teams how to play basketball.